We are absolutely swimming in a sea of data. But in that endless ocean, how do we find what's actually true? Well, that's the whole challenge of statistical inference. It's the science of making smart, educated guesses about the world using just a tiny little slice of information. So let's dive in.
I mean, think about it. We face questions like this every single day. Is this new drug a life-saving breakthrough, or is it just a fluke? Did that super expensive marketing campaign we just ran actually do anything? The answer? The real answer is buried in the data we collect.
And this brings us right to the heart of the problem in statistics. We want to know the truth, the complete total picture. But here's the thing. It's almost always too big, too expensive, or just flat out impossible to see everything. So what do? We have to rely on a sample. It's our one small clue to a much, much bigger mystery.
Think of it this way. The population is this vast, sprawling landscape. You can't possibly see it all at once. But what you can get is a single photo, and that's your sample. Our entire job is to look at that one photo and try to figure out what the entire landscape is like. As you can probably guess, that's a pretty tricky business.
Okay, so let's get our terms straight, because this is important. The number we really care about, like the true average recovery time for everyone with a disease, that's called a parameter. It's a fixed but kind of unknowable truth. The number we can actually calculate from our little snapshot of data, the average recovery time in our study, is a statistic. The whole game is using the statistic we can see to make a really good guess about the parameter we can't. So, how do we make that guess? Well, our first tool is something called the confidence interval. And you can think of it like casting a net. We're not trying to hit the exact truth with a single tiny spear. That's way too hard. Instead, we're trying to capture it within a reasonable range of possibilities.
Now, the simplest guess we can make is what's called a point estimate. It's just one number. For example, our study shows a new drug has a 50% success rate. That's our best guess. But here's the problem. That single number gives us absolutely zero sense of how certain we should be. Is it 50% plus or minus a little or a lot? We just don't know.
Right, so let's say our data from a marketing campaign shows a 5% conversion rate. Is that number solid? Is it something you'd bet the company's entire budget on? A single number is almost useless on its own because it completely ignores uncertainty.
And that's where the confidence interval comes in to save the day. It takes our best guess, that 5%, and it builds a safety margin around it. It's our way of saying, look, our best guess is 5%, but we're pretty darn confident the real truth is somewhere in this net, maybe between, say, 2% and 8%.
But, and this is a huge but, the size of that safety net, that margin of error, depends almost entirely on how much data you have. If your sample is tiny, maybe you only tracked 50 people, your margin of error is going to be massive. Your net is incredibly wide. Sure, the truth is probably in there somewhere, but the range is so big it's not very helpful.
Now look what happens when we ramp up our sample size to, let's say, 10,000 people. Our point estimate might still be 5%, but bam, that margin of error shrinks dramatically. Our net gets so much smaller, so much more precise. It's simple, really. More data means more certainty.
Okay, so that was about estimation. Our second major tool, the hypothesis test, is all about making a decision. And the best way to think about this is like a courtroom drama, where we are literally putting a claim on trial.
In this courtroom, the defendant is the null hypothesis. This is the boring, status quo idea that nothing interesting is going on. The new drug has no effect. The ad campaign did nothing. It is presumed innocent. The prosecutor in this trial is the researcher, who comes in with the alternative hypothesis. This is the exciting new claim that there is a real effect to be found.
And this trial follows a very strict procedure. Step 1, you state your two competing stories, the null and the alternative. Step 2, you decide on your standard for proof. How much evidence is beyond a reasonable doubt? We call this alpha. Step 3, you go out and collect your evidence, your data. And finally, step 4, you calculate something called a p-value to see if your evidence is strong enough to convict the null hypothesis.
So, what on earth is a p-value? This is the crucial part. It is not the probability that your claim is true. Let me say that again. It's the probability of seeing the data you saw, if the null hypothesis were true, if nothing was actually going on. So a really tiny p-value just means your results are super surprising, very unlikely to have happened by random chance. And if it's surprising enough, usually less than 5%, we say we have enough evidence to reject the innocent null hypothesis, and we declare our results statistically significant.
But, and I'm sure you saw this coming, this whole process is not foolproof. Not at all. Just like in a real courtroom, sometimes the jury gets it wrong. And these incredibly powerful statistical tools can absolutely lead us to the wrong conclusion if we're not super careful.
You know, there are basically two ways this can go wrong. A type 1 error is a false alarm. It's convicting an innocent person. We conclude a drug works when it's actually totally useless. A type 2 error is a missed opportunity. We let a guilty person walk free. We fail to recognize a drug that genuinely works, maybe because our study just wasn't big enough to see the effect.
And this leads us to what is maybe the single most important concept in this entire explainer. There is a huge, critical difference between a result that is statistically significant and one that is practically significant. They are not the same thing at all.
I mean, just look at this example. If you have a massive sample size, you can prove with statistical certainty that a new drug lowers blood pressure by exactly 1 point. That effect is real. Your p-value will be tiny. But is it useful? No way. A 1-point drop is completely meaningless to a doctor or a patient. It has zero practical importance. And what's more, the standard for what even counts as proof changes wildly depending on the stakes. In social science, a 5% chance of being wrong is often okay. But if you're a particle physicist claiming you've discovered a fundamental particle of the universe, the standard is 5 sigma. That's a 1 in 3.5 million chance of being wrong. Different fields have very different burdens of proof. And even worse, people can cheat the system. It's called p-hacking, and it's a whole collection of sketchy research practices where scientists basically torture their data until it confesses. They might run 20 different tests, but only report the one that worked, or they'll stop collecting data the very second their p-value dips below that magic 0.05 line. It's a massive problem that can fill the scientific literature with false alarms. All of this complexity has led to this really fascinating deep debate about how we should even think about probability itself. It turns out there's more than one philosophy when it comes to finding the truth.
So the traditional approach we've been talking about is called frequentist. Its confidence interval is a weird statement about the method. It says, if we did this 100 times, our method would work 95 of those times. But there's another school of thought, the Bayesian approach, that lets us make a much more intuitive statement. Their credible interval says what we all want to say. There's a 95% probability the truth is in this range. It's a subtle difference in words, but it's a profound philosophical shift.
So, the next time you see a headline screaming about a new scientific study that makes some big, bold claim, I want to leave you with this one question. Don't just ask if the result was statistically significant. Go deeper. Ask if the effect was big enough to actually matter. Ask how many people were in the study. Ask if it's meaningful, because that right there is the true heart of statistical thinking.